In today's thrift store challenge, we will be tackling Magnolia and the new Hearth and Hand collection through Target. So if you're new here, we're going to go to Target, get loads of inspiration, look at the Magnolia website, and then we're gonna go to the thrift store and see what we can come up with for a whole lot less. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. A really great way to kind of trick the eye in reducing visual clutter is to add trays, especially decorative trays, but you don't have to pay the Magnolia price tag. You can find beautiful trays at the thrift store. In terms of the style that you would really want to look for if you love Magnolia and Hearth and Hand, you want to pick something that's overall pretty neutral, but then just has that one little extra fine detail that just makes it feel a little bit more unique. And also consider where you're going to put the tray. So if it's going in the kitchen, it has to check a few boxes for me. Of course, it has to be food safe. And then I want it to be fairly large in scale to accommodate for all of the produce. And also, as I mentioned earlier, corralling the items just to make them feel like they're just one thing versus a bunch of small little things. So because this tray was a really nice size, I already had the canister sets from Target previously, and it just looks like one solid piece versus just feeling really visually busy. Another thing to pay attention to when you're out thrifting is just looking at the trends of things that you really love. So let's say you love these beaded picture frames, but maybe you don't find picture frames, but I found two of these really nice sized bowls here that were wood. Only problem was one of the beads was broken off, so I just molded some air dry clay to fill that spot there. One really easy DIY, if you find two of the exact same style of bowls, but one is smaller than the other, this is a great opportunity to give yourself kind of a tiered bowl tray situation, kind of like this one from Williams-Sonoma. Now, these bowls originally were already not food safe, so that's why I felt totally confident painting them and using them differently. So for your connecting piece, you can really use anything, but I think the easiest thing to use is some form of a candle holder. Because I liked the depth that those picture frames from Magnolia had, I decided to first spray paint with some dark brown matte spray paint, and then I went over it with a combination of white wax and brown antiquing wax, just to give it a little bit more depth and effect. Once the wax dried, I just needed to connect all of the pieces together, and I just did so using E6000 just because it's a really nice, strong industrial strength glue. For styling, I just kept mine really easy, just doing a little plant on top, leaving some room at the bottom here for just like extra jewelry or knickknacks. And also, don't be afraid to ask your thrift store if they would consider separating an item. So for example, I was at the Hartwell thrift shop. This had been sitting and sitting and sitting, and I was like, I really don't want the big orange ottoman, but I would totally use the top piece for a tray. And they totally had no problem with it. I think in their eyes, they can still maybe sell that orange ottoman, and now I can just have the piece that I really wanted, which was just the tray. I just had to attach that bottom piece that kept slipping out with liquid nails, and I just pressed it overnight. Trays that are usually this scale from high-end retailers can cost upwards around $100. So the fact that this was just $6 and in basically perfect condition was a really great find. One of my favorite things that Magnolia and Hearth and Hand, I think they've been doing more of this recently, is adding just really creative, beautiful ways to store different items. The wall shelving through the Magnolia line is one of my absolute favorites because it feels very interesting. It is expensive, but it's just those little things that make your space feel a little bit more unique. And shopping at the thrift store is a really great way to find those kind of one-of-a-kind pieces, but on a major budget. Now, you almost always need to do some sort of DIY project to them. For example, I found this storage basket here, and all of the baskets are $3 unless otherwise marked, and this one had no other markings on it, and it was a fairly large basket. So because of that, I thought, even if it doesn't pan out, I'm only out $3. Especially when I went over to Target and saw that a storage basket much smaller was $40. Started off by just, of course, cleaning the basket. That's kind of a no-brainer. Steam and disinfectant spray is usually what I like to do. The biggest change that I really wanted to make with this basket, because the function was actually really nice, it was just the color that was just way too orange. So if you are ever trying to paint a basket, what I like to start off first by doing after cleaning it is paint it with a really great primer. I will link the one that I like to use. You wanna make sure that you're really killing all of those orange tones, so then that way when you go in with your wax combination, it will apply really evenly. So the wax combo that I like to use is a brown antiquing wax, and then it's a white wax mixed together in equal parts, and then I like to use a wax brush. And I think you just get, it's hard to explain. It's just like the perfect basket tone. Again, I have to be really careful when I shop at the thrift store because my floors have a kind of grayish yellow undertone, and finding $3 baskets that are the right undertone just don't exist. So shopping secondhand, you're able to really transform pieces using really simple and inexpensive technique. Now, because my plan for this is to put it up on the wall, almost like a rattan cabinet, I wanted to find some really interesting hardware, and I wasn't finding exactly what I was looking for. So I grabbed from my little girl's old mobile. Now that she's in a big girl bed, we don't use it anymore. So I just grabbed one of the pieces from that, almost like a back plate to an existing piece of hardware that I just had in my stash. And I'm just going to combine those two pieces together. So I needed to drill a hole in that little metal piece. One thing, if you are ever drilling anything, really, you should wear goggles, but especially with metal, just because of the metal shards that can kind of fly out. I just wanted to tape that metal piece down so it would stay nice and secure, and then that way the shards would just kind of stay on the tape. All that was left to do then was just combine the pieces together. So I needed to drill that hole so then that way I could place the screw in from the back to the back plate and then be able to twist on that knob piece. The last time I was at the Goodwill bins, I had found these cork sheets that were fairly thick, and I wanted to add something a little bit more solid on top of the shelves, so then that way they would just be a little bit more sturdy in case I wanted to put some smaller items in here. I'm planning on using this in my bathroom just to kind of add a little bit more storage, but in a beautiful way. Hang a little towel from one of the handles, just make it feel really custom and personal to me. Kind of in the same category are wall hooks, especially if you're really trying to get organized this time of year. I think a lot of people in January are really focusing on decluttering and organization. One thing that you can definitely do, and you don't need to go to Magnolia and spend $38, check out your thrift store first, because I find these sets of wall hooks just like this all the time. And even if maybe they're not the color you're looking for, easy change to make, especially if you keep spray paints on hand like I do. Went in first with some metallic gold, and then just to kind of not make it so intense, I like to just dust some matte black spray paint on after. Make sure that you're using a good sealer just to make sure it doesn't kind of scratch off that color, but a super easy adjustment to make for just a few dollars. Now let's talk about those kind of specialty hooks. You know the ones I'm talking about, the ones that are ridiculously overpriced from Anthropologie or even through Magnolia, but you can definitely do this just using thrifted items. So I found this wood trivet, just did the taupe and wax trick just to kind of make it feel a little bit more modern. I found this little aged brass flower drawer pull, and there was only one of them, so perfect for a situation like this one. I just took a Z bracket from a frame that I wasn't using and just attached it to the back of this piece, so that way I would have a means to hang it, just to give me a means to kind of screw the knob and this piece together. I just screwed a hole directly in the middle, combined the pieces together, and pieces like this are really what make your space feel custom to you when you can source and curate and combine things together that no one else in the world has, and you can do it so affordably by shopping secondhand. Moving along now to candles. Oh, this is basically where Hearth and Hand gets me every single time. I love the colors that they use for their tapers. They are not that expensive, like 13 bucks isn't that much, but I found these 6 candles that are normally like $85 on Amazon. Now I only had half of the box, so not 12, but 6, but I paid pennies for these, and they're beautiful. They look so similar to the ones from the Hearth and Hand line. Also found this really beautiful patinaed brass candle holder that looks super similar to the one from Magnolia. Combined the two pieces together for a few dollars, and you can have such a similar look. Also, if you're like me and you just really can't stand the packaging from Bath & Body Works, their scents are so great, but their packaging is like an F for me. So I wish that they would just use canisters that were beautiful that you can use after the fact, but this is something that you can just do yourself. So I took the candle that smelled so delicious, but I hated the packaging, one of those bowls that we found in the beginning of this video, and I'm just going to melt this wax down on a simmer, just on low heat. I let it sit for like 40 minutes, just removed the wicks that were existing inside of there. Always keep some aluminum foil nearby just in case you have a little wax spill. warm the bowl up for just like 30 seconds to a minute, just so then that way the wax doesn't pucker. I also like to just make a little like spout out of some aluminum foil, so that way the wax just goes kind of directly where I want it to go, and then just kind of let it solidify, trim the wicks down, and now you have a beautiful but also really great smelling candle on a super tight budget. Another kind of scent related thing that I just can't imagine anybody actually spending $40 on this is to make a stovetop simmer. You guys probably have a lot of these ingredients at home. I know I do. So, I mean, even if you have to go out and buy the lavender, and you would get a whole bundle of lavender, but I wouldn't buy it from the Hearth and Hand line. You can get like twice as much at Trader Joe's and it smells exactly the same. But just look through the ingredients of the one that you're really trying to replicate and see how many of those ingredients you can really do. So like for this lemon and lime one, I didn't have any limes, but I have tons of lemons. So I just took this old container that I wasn't using anymore, just popped the top off, gave it a good clean, grabbed some lemons from the fridge, and then just take your baking tray, line it with either aluminum foil or parchment paper, slice the lemons, limes, oranges, whatever you're using, just slice thinly. Bake at 225 for 3 hours, maybe flipping every 45 minutes about, and they will be exactly like what you would see on Magnolia's website. Also, I had a few roses that were almost dead, so I just dried the petals out. I know that she used rose petals in one of her simmer mixes, so just dried them out, and I can place these as well inside of there. I personally like to use clove. It's just like a very robust kind of spicy almost scent, and then cinnamon as well in that category. Throw in some rosemary, great to give as a gift or just to use for yourself. Moving along now to decorative objects like the candles. This is always a very dangerous area for me when I go to Target. I love her take on kind of those vintage inspired pieces, but you can find actually vintage pieces at your thrift store. It just requires a little bit of digging. For example, I found this little, I'm assuming this was an oil lamp maybe, just removed that bottom section there so I could give it a really good clean because the glass was incredibly dirty. With the glass all kind of cleaned off, I just wanted to remove that handle there just because I felt like we could do a little bit better using something that I already had. Decor items like this are really great because they can be so versatile. You can use this as kind of like a picture frame, just tape the picture to the back of the inside of this little mini lantern here. Just going to use this little extra metal piece that I had, just attaching the two pieces together. I like to use this specific Gorilla Glue that's designed for metal to metal, and it works really, really well. Because I already had a picture on that shelf, I just decided to use this as a little mini tea light holder, and I think that this is just a nice way to make use of something from the thrift store, but give it a new life. Moving along now to the pottery. This is one of those areas that I think can be so tempting because it's like no-brainer styling. You can just go right to the Hearth and Hand collection, pick a pre-arranged floral arrangement, and you're done. And I've done that. Also a really easy thing to do yourself. Pick any vase that you find at the thrift store. If you don't like the color, it doesn't matter. We can change that anyway. Sometimes I think the thrift store overcharges on pottery. This vase from retail was gonna be $6, and then I found it at the bins for less than $1. Just mixed some plaster of Paris with some white acrylic paint. Just gave that 2 to 3 coats just to make sure the vase was completely covered. Just gave it a gentle sanding with some 220 grit sandpaper just to get rid of any like areas that were peaking, and then just took some watered down antiquing wax and then just wiped off the excess with a paper towel. And you get the same kind of look that I think she does a lot through the Hearth and Hand line, that kind of just distressed pottery. Found this one stem at the thrift store, but I wanted it to be a little bit more full. So this is a stem I would recommend from the Hearth and Hand line. I think for $4.99, it is kind of a more realistic look than a lot of the other things you'll see, and you can really create something so beautiful but on a budget when you shop mostly secondhand. Other really great little things I like to collect are pieces that don't take up a ton of space. Like this little wood bowl here, there's, I'm sure, 1,000,001 ways to use this little bowl. Obviously, you can use it as a bowl, but you can also use it as a bookend, just propping it up that way or this way, or just taking items like, for example, this butter press mold. I don't intend on ever probably using it for that reason, but having these little vintage pieces are great. Just taking the mold, separating it, putting it on the inside. Because this was designed to be food safe, I have no problem just sticking some extra kitchen items like garlic or whatever it may be. Just a beautiful way to store produce on a budget. Last but not least, let's talk about some textiles. The next time you go to the thrift store, instead of focusing on what the item is, maybe it's a pillow, a bed sheet, a skirt, it doesn't really matter what the item is. It matters what the fabric is, because the fabric, if you have basic sewing skills, can really be whatever you want it to be. For example, I found this gingham pillowcase. I just found the one. I won't use it as a pillowcase, but there's so many different items that are that gingham print from Magnolia. I could turn this into a bread bowl cover and bag set, but what I really need is some new oven mitts. Mine just looks so bedraggled that I really could use an improvement, and this is just a really easy, inexpensive way. Just separate your oven mitts, take off the fabric, and then apply whatever fabric that you want on there, because you're basically given kind of like the structure and you just add whatever you want to put on there, and it's the easiest thing. So while I don't need any more lumbar pillows, something I'm always seemingly going through really quickly are hand towels. And I think a big part of that is my kids they don't know. They're just going to wash their hands after finger painting. And when they go to dry them, a lot of that paint is not completely removed. So I think it's one of those things that I don't want to spend a lot of money on because I'm having to replace them so often. So if I find fabric that I like, I will just do kind of like a no-sew technique, just fringe all of the sides. 2 hand towels for 50 cents that have this kind of linear pattern are, even through the Hearth and Hand line through Target, are gonna be at least $10. So find areas and ways to kind of save where you can, especially if you know you're going to go through them often. With all that being said, that really wraps it up for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments which hack or project or idea was your favorite this week, and I will see you guys next Sunday. Bye for now.